Good evening, friends. Tonight's talk again is on the from the Dhammapada, chapter 12. This chapter is called the Attavagga or Attavagga section or Attavagga chapter, and it relates to self-care in a very, very practical way. This chapter speaks so eloquently about an awakened human being's unending compassion for other human beings and his understanding of the most important thing that anyone can do if they're concerned about their own well-being, which the Buddha teaches us is paramount. In other words, a true understanding of the Dhamma is that if we are truly going to love others, we must start loving ourselves. We must treat ourselves with care, with compassion, and with gentleness. And the more gentle we are with ourselves, the more gentle and compassionate and mindfully present we'll be for other people. But it starts with ourselves first, and which really flies into the face. I don't want to get too deep into this, but the idea of modern engaged Buddhism, and that the way to change, no, it's not even the right way to say it, that a true Buddhist practice is about changing the world towards an ideology that we might happen to believe in, whether it's right or wrong or moral or immoral. That really isn't the point. The point is that doesn't address the root problem. And the only way to address the root problem of ignorance in other people is to first resolve it within ourselves. And that's what the Buddha's teaching here. So this chapter begins with the Buddha's words. If one truly cares for themselves, they will diligently practice restraint. That's where there's a whole series of articles on the wisdom of restraint, and I talk about it often, as does the Buddha. That's why I do. And again, not to get too deep into something else tonight, the Dhamma is practiced at the point of contact with the sixth sense base, and that's what the Buddha is referring to, diligently practicing restraint. If we're diligently practicing restraint, we are diligently engaged in the Buddha's Dhamma practice as framed by the Eightfold Path. The wise Dhamma practitioner is always mindful of thoughts, words, and deeds. The wise Dhamma practitioner avoids reproach and understands the Dhamma before they instruct others. Boy, what a different world this would be, and certainly a different Buddhist world, if people wouldn't decide that they can just teach because they heard somebody else say something, they called it Buddhist practice, or some podcaster of the day, or maybe even a podcaster of the last 10 years. They use a few slogans, and they're obviously not above reproach because they don't understand the Dhamma, and yet they're instructing others. Something the Buddha cautioned against 2,600 years ago. The wise Dhamma practitioner acts as they teach others to act. It's simple direction. And again, relate that to a lot of the modern Buddhist lineages today. There's hardly one that hasn't been led and misled by a sexual predator, which again relates to all of these sentences that a teacher who doesn't understand the Dhamma shouldn't be teaching, and that's certainly reflective in the Dhamma that they teach and others follow. And they're certainly not practicing what they teach others either. The Buddha continues, the wise Dhamma practitioner controls themselves. Self-control is indeed difficult. The Buddha understands this is where this great compassion that Siddartha Gotama shows for others. He knows how difficult this is, yet at the same time, it's the most freeing way of living a life. But it's difficult. It's difficult to go from ignorance to wisdom, but once we've developed a measure of wisdom, we realize that this truly is a nearly effortless life. The Buddha continues, the wise Dhamma practitioner protects themselves. Who else could do so? Fully controlled, the wise Dhamma practitioner achieves what is difficult to achieve. The encouragement here that we can do this. The suffering a fool does by themselves, from themselves, and produced by themselves, listen to this line, grinds themselves down as a diamond grinds a lesser stone. He's just, what a perfect description of the self-imposed suffering that we put ourselves through, just rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Just as a single creeper strangles a tree, the depraved fool harms themselves as an enemy would. Hurtful thoughts, words, and deeds are easy to do. Difficult is remaining harmless and helpful. Those with fabricated views, the fabricated views are views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Those with fabricated views who scorn the Dhamma and the teachers of the Dhamma, this fool produces their own destruction. Think about what so many people are calling Buddhism today, and how they actually react to the few that actually do teach the Dhamma. The fool does harm. The fool is defiled. The wise Dhamma practitioner abandons hurtful thoughts, words, and deeds, and makes themselves pure. Makes themselves pure. It's up to each individual. Purity and impurity depend on oneself, and no one can purify another. Again, remember the Buddha is talking about self-care. If we really want to take care of ourselves, we understand that it's up to us to purify our thoughts, words, and our deeds, not up to some amorphous spiritual system, certainly not up to deity, gods, or gaining benefit because we're somehow special or we've done enough chanting or enough bowing. Only one can purify themselves. Do not neglect, the Buddha continues, do not neglect one's own welfare for the sake of another. What he's saying is that if we're going to be helpful towards others, we first have to be helpful towards ourselves. However enticing that might be, knowing clearly one's own welfare first, the wise Dhamma practitioner can now be intent on calm, and through that have a true and lasting effect on world peace, just as the Buddha did. Imagine what this man accomplished in 45 years. That is still having profound effect today, because for one thing, he didn't start teaching anything until he knew what it was to teach, and then he was a living example of his Dhamma every moment that he lived. I thought that was the end. I just wanted to make sure. That's the end of tonight's talk. I say often, and anybody that listens to my recordings will hear me say this, that the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and for all others is to take to the Dhamma and awaken. And we're so fortunate that an awakened human being's Dhamma is still here, available, and accessible to any human being that wants to develop it. So if you find benefit from these talks, please consider a donation at becoming-buddha.com. Thank you. Peace.